Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is the RFP training for the Greater Twin Cities United Way Community Investments Request or Proposal for the years 2018-2019. We're happy to have you listening to this audio recording today. This RFP is a big milestone for us. As many of you know, United Way recently went through an extensive strategic planning process. It resulted in a long-range plan that challenges our organization to examine all of our work against the needs, hopes, and dreams of the Twin Cities region. And this RFP is a key part of our transformation and is the result of over 100 conversations with our grantee partners, community leaders, donors, as well as corporate partners. So in our RFP training today, you'll hear from me first. My name is Megan O'Mara. I am a member of the Community Impact Team here at Greater Twin Cities United Way. I'll speak a little to United Way's Community Impact Strategy, some of the general RFP process and timeline, give an overview there, and then I will be passing it over to my colleagues to speak more in depth on the focus areas that the RFP covers. Our long-range plan here at United Way resulted in a new mission, vision, and set of values for the organization. And these statements speak clearly to our desire to show up differently, and in the case of our mission, which is now galvanizing our community to build pathways toward prosperity and equity for all, replaces a deficit-focused approach with our old mission with a new, more asset-based aspirational mission. We also chose to include equity in our mission. This helps us as an organization really center ourselves on our focus on equity. And we know equity is a journey, one that we are on, one that we have made mistakes in the past, but we, like many of us, are working to be better in this area. And we hope that you see our focus and intentionality on equity throughout the RFP process. The Community Impact Strategy, of which this RFP is a key part, is a product, as I said, of over 100 conversations with our community, as well as analysis of local data and our understanding of the gaps and our role in the broader ecosystem of which we all work. When we were having these 100 conversations with our partners, the one question we would ask everyone, well, two questions really. The first was really to ask them to identify what they thought the greatest needs and challenges of our communities were. And then second, we would ask them, where do they think Greater Twin Cities United Way is best positioned to focus? What we heard most frequently around challenges was employment, education, housing and food security, as well as a stronger focus on systems change and policy. And so if you look at this slide, this sort of sunrise on the left side, you'll see those needs represented. And then on the right side, what we've done is, what we've tried to do is take those challenges and craft movable outcomes that Greater Twin Cities United Way could really focus on to make some progress towards, along with many others in our community, which has really resulted in 3 impact areas: household stability, educational success, economic opportunity, with equity really underlying all of the work. Beyond our grant making, of which this RFP is a core part, but certainly won't represent all of our grant making, we've also identified 3 other key levers to help us move these outcomes forward: capacity building, impact measurement, as well as systems change. And you'll hear and see more from us in these 3 areas in the coming months as we build out those strategies. All right, and now the reason that you're all listening to this audio recording, the RFP. So first, some key dates. The RFP opened November 13th. On November 14th, the day after, we held 2 in-person trainings. We are also, this is new for us as part of our RFP process, we're holding a series of community office hours. So these will be informal drop-in opportunities staffed by United Way Community Impact staff, where you can stop by and ask questions around your application or your RFP and have a chance to sort of sit and talk with a person. No appointment needed to drop in on that, The next slide will show when those are happening. The RFP closes January 8th. That's an important date. It closes at 3 p.m. and all online applications will need to be submitted by that time. We anticipate that we'll be notifying all applicants, all partners of funding by April 2019. This follows, we'll have a board meeting in April to finalize and approve all grants, and then we'll be notifying folks right afterwards. And then the new grants will begin on July 1st, 2019. This slide shows those community office hours I was just speaking to, taking place between November 27th and December 10th. You could also go to our website, which is listed here at the bottom, and see these dates as well. Like I said, no need to sign up, just show up and there'll be someone there to chat with you. So if you've applied for funding with United Way before, this RFP may have some areas or some pieces that feel different. So the first thing I want to say is we're really trying within this funding cycle to focus on outcomes and impact and results. And we certainly care, we still care about approach, we still care about best practices and evidence and all of that sort of thing. But we really are trying to give a little more flexibility to how programs get to outcomes, and really make outcomes the thing that we are holding ourselves and our grantee partners accountable for. You'll notice that there is just one RFP. You may be used to seeing several sort of large RFPs come out of United Way over the course of a 3-year cycle, perhaps one in education, followed by one in safety net, one in jobs, but we've really condensed all of that, and this is really that RFP. This is the totality of our unrestricted grant investments, what's often referred to as multi-year. That is this RFP. And we did that to really reflect the holistic nature of the work that you're all doing. We know that especially with challenges and issues of poverty, working in silos is really not helpful, and so we're doing our best to try to start moving towards more integrated, holistic outcomes as well as funding. And so along with that one RFP, you will be submitting one organizational application, so just one application submitted per organization. So I'll take a second now and talk about kind of how the RFP is organized. So I spoke briefly about the impact areas that really frame our work: educational success, economic opportunity, and household stability. Within each of those impact areas, you'll see 1 to 2 what we're calling portfolios, formerly known as goal areas, but these sort of drive your application. So each portfolio underneath the impact area will have its own set of outcomes and indicators that an applicant would be accountable for if successfully funded. So again, just because this is a little different, and I want to be clear, there's 3 impact areas: educational success, economic opportunity, and household stability. Under those impact areas, there's portfolios. So under educational success, the portfolios are early childhood education and career and future readiness. Career and future readiness is formerly known as out-of-school time. Under economic opportunity, you have employment and financial stability. This area you may have known it before as increased earnings. And then household stability, which you would have maybe known formerly as safety net, has 2 portfolios underneath it: housing and food security. As I said, organizations will submit one application. They can submit in as many of those 5 portfolio areas as they choose. They can't submit more than once in a portfolio. So you can pick any of those 5 portfolio areas that you see on this slide here, but you can only do it once. If you're successful in any of those portfolio areas as part of this RFP, your organization will receive 1 grant. So everything is sort of rolling up into one organizational grant. And we're anticipating right now that grant amounts, we think it'll be a minimum of $50,000, an average of $75,000 by portfolio area. And I just want to say a few things on sort of what we currently anticipate around funding. So as I just said, We anticipate calculating that organizational grant based on portfolio area using that minimum of 50. We think an average of around 75,000. We don't know yet our available funds for the 2019-2020 grant year. Our budget comes in March, and so we're unable to sort of commit or, I think put sort of a top level out there. It's going to be based on, things like availability of funding, as well as how many applications come in and what sort of the scoring looks like. I think it is likely that this RFP cycle that we'll be looking at a funding band based on competitive criteria, so a low and a high, as opposed to relying solely on, for example, an organization's historical grant award amount or solely on their request. And I know that will be a change. And could be pretty impactful for some organizations, but want to sort of be clear that we will likely be looking at a minimum and maximum, and how we sort of determine that amount would be based on competitive criteria like score and things like that. In the application, you'll see, we'll get to this later as well, but we will ask you at the portfolio level to tell us what your request would be to deliver on the outcomes that you sort of set forth in the outcome and indicator section. This is really to give us context for the work that you propose, and it also gives us a sort of comparison point against other applications in the portfolio. But I want to stress this won't be sort of the sole thing we'll be looking at when deciding grant award amounts. A few more things on funding details, or on funding. Grant awards are general operating. This, if you've been funded or worked with us before, this is also a change. Our multi-year grants used to be program specific, but as I said, organizations are applying once for anywhere between 1 and 5 portfolio areas. They'll receive, if successful, 1 organizational grant, and that grant will be general operating. So you are free as an organization to use that money however you best see fit within your organization. You will be accountable for the outcomes within the portfolios where you were successful, but the money, again, is general operating. There are 3 restrictions on the Gen Ops funds. They cannot be used for direct lobbying, capital projects, or sub-granting outside of United Way approved partnerships. The grant award is for 1 year, as I said, beginning July 1, 2019. We will have the intent to renew these grants until 2022 for a total of a 3-year cycle, at which point we would plan to issue a new RFP. But I want to make it really clear, these are 1-year grants. Future funding will be contingent on compliance, progress towards outcomes, and most importantly on United Way's unrestricted funding, so the availability of our unrestricted funding. And so if you are awarded a grant, it begins July 1, 2019, you'll hear if your funding has been renewed each subsequent year by April of that next year. This aligns with our fundraising cycle. We get our final budgets in quarter 1 of every year. So I just wanted to take a second again to speak to how this RFP is organized. You'll see here the impact areas on the left: educational success, household stability, and economic opportunity. We then have the 5 portfolio areas that I spoke to before: early childhood, career and future readiness, housing, food security, and employment and financial sustainability. And then you'll also see here listed long-term outcomes. So these really are more, these are more sort of the visions and the aspirational outcomes that as a community we're all really trying to move. We know that you put a lot of time and care into the applications you submit for funding, and we also take our role as reviewers of your applications very seriously, and plan to run a pretty rigorous review process. So a little bit about what you can expect if you submit an application. So first, a screening of eligibility criteria. So I'll speak more to that in a minute, but it's really important that you look carefully at eligibility for funding under this RFP. Reach out and ask us if you aren't sure on something, because proposals that don't meet eligibility criteria will not be scored and will not be funded. So once eligibility, we sort of do that eligibility screen. Proposals that are eligible are then read and scored against a detailed scoring rubric by at least 3 reviewers, all United Way staff. Following that, we'll sort of look at those scores across the continuum, and then some organizations will be invited to participate in a site visit where we'll have a chance to clarify parts of the application that weren't clear, ask deeper questions about services and impact, things like that. Organizations that are invited for a site visit will have met a certain scoring threshold and will likely be in that top group of applicants. And all organizations will be notified whether they're getting a site visit or are no longer in the running for funding. You'll hear from us around late January, early February. You can expect some notification from us either by phone or email at that point that will help you sort of understand where you are in the process. Final decisions on grants will be determined and approved by our board in April, and then we'll alert organizations on if they've received funding or not, right after that board meeting in April 2019, and like I said, grants start on July 1. I also want to say that we will be working with the Community Advisory Council, so a group of diverse external experts in the areas that we're focused on to provide impact or input, feedback, as well as assist us in making grant decisions. So if you've had the chance to look at the application guidelines, you can find those on page 39 of your RFP. You will see the full application. This mirrors the application that you'll fill in online. You do need to submit the actual application has to be filled out online. The one in the RFP is for your reference, just really for reference only. You'll also see in the application guidelines in the RFP information on what we're looking for in each question and just some guidance on how questions will be scored and how much they'll be scored. I really encourage people to spend some time with the application guidelines. We tried to write them as clearly as we could to make it clear to you what information was needed in order for us to be able to score your answer. So I do want to I'll walk through right now that's just the outline of the application and highlight some pieces that I think just are worth saying a few things more about. So part A of the application is organizational information, real straightforward, name, address, things like that. We are allowing partnerships as part of this RFP. This is the first time we've done that. We're allowing organizations to apply as partnerships. It's not an expectation. You don't get extra points, but we wanted to give the option for groups to work together to put forward a stronger application if they think that their partnership does that. Please reach out to us if you're considering applying as a partnership. We want to be able to provide guidance to you on how to best fill out the application in a way that gets us the info we need to score. So you'll see there our contact info at that point of the application, but please do reach out. It'll make your life much easier if you try to navigate sort of the partnership piece of the application. Part B, you'll see organizational questions. This is a series of narrative questions about your organization. You're answering these from an organizational perspective. Part C is portfolio level questions. So depending on how many portfolios you choose up at the top of the application, you'll be filling out 2 narrative questions for each one. One around your sort of solution and approach and one around the results. And you'll need to answer these, like I said, for each portfolio you choose. So if you are applying for the food security portfolio and the early childhood portfolio, you would be filling out the questions in section C 2 times. And this is because we, as much as we hate to have questions repeated, we felt it was really important to give you space to write about some of the really specific work and results that you're doing within these the specific portfolio areas as it relates to the outcomes attached to them. Section D, again at the portfolio level, is demographics. So this is the data form. We collect demographic data for all of our grantees to help us understand our impact. And in the context of the RFP, we also it's also really important for us to determine eligibility criteria as well as some scoring elements. So you're filling out the demographic form once for each portfolio area you apply for. So again, if you apply for food security and for early childhood, you'd have one demographic form that represents all of the people you serve within your food security program, around the food security activities, regardless of income level, and another demographic form for all the people you're serving within the early childhood activities, regardless of income. And that's sort of critical. We want to see the full scope of the people that are being served at that portfolio level, regardless of sort of their income level. Section E is outcomes and indicators at the portfolio level. So each portfolio has its own set of outcomes and indicators. You'll fill this out with mostly data, filling in numbers. There's some short narrative attached here. So you'll be asked to fill out numbers based on your past year of results and then your projections for the future if you were funded under this RFP. If you don't track or if you don't have past data, you'll see options for how to indicate that. Here we want your data only for those that you serve at 200% or below of the federal poverty guidelines. This is the group we're looking to really impact with these outcomes, and so we're really just looking for that group under 200% of the federal poverty line. So again, in Section D, demographics, everyone in the program. Section E, outcomes and indicators, just those at 200% of poverty or below. And it's listed in the application, but I'll also state here, many programs are collecting income data specifically, but there's lots of proxies that can be used, such as medical assistance, eligibility for free and reduced lunch, things like that. There's a list of it in the RFP. Section F is the organizational financial review. So this is also a data sheet in the online application, and it pulls mostly from your 990s or your org financials, and there's really clear instructions of just sort of plugging in different numbers from your 990s. On the back end, it's calculating different ratios that are helping us understand and look at financial sustainability for the organization. And then Section G and H, documents to upload. This is you'll see a list of all sort of the required documents, and this is sort of the place where you upload these. It's pretty straightforward. And then service locations are where you are physically doing the work. This helps us understand really the breadth of where our dollars are going around the 9-county area. Helps in some cases in the review process around scoring. If you're an organization that just has a unique situation where you have like 100 different service delivery locations, or you're sort of no service delivery location, you're just kind of out and about in different neighborhoods, just reach out and we'll figure out a way for you to get us sort of the information needed. So as I believe I mentioned, not all questions in this RFP are scored. In the application guidelines, it will say if a question is scored or not, and if it's not, it'll say why we're asking it. But in this table here, you will see the areas that we will be scoring and how we've chosen to weight each of those areas. And so you can see that about 30% of the score of your application will be focused on leadership representation, how well your leadership represents the communities that you're predominantly serving, as well as community engagement of your organization. And about half will be about solutions and approach, as well as results and impact. And our intent here is really to hold the values of equity and community focus alongside strong solutions and results. So some organizations may do all of this stuff really well. Some may do one part well or the other really well, but we think with this breakdown, we're still ensuring rigor and impact, while opening the door for some organizations that may not usually find themselves competitive in our grant process, able to apply and compete. So this slide's important. This is our core organizational eligibility requirements. Excuse me. So please be sure you're able to meet all of these criteria before applying. I'm going to highlight some of those that may be new or may have changed from past RFPs, but again, these are what I call sort of the deal breakers, where if you don't meet one of these one of these criteria, you really shouldn't be applying for funding because your application will not be eligible. Okay, so 501c3, I just want to be clear, in the past, we have sometimes allowed sort of a wider type of organization to apply, but this RFP and this bucket of funding is going to be restricted just to organizations that have 501c3 status. So no school districts, no counties, no 501c4s, no private businesses, things like that. The next one I'll highlight is the poverty threshold or the income threshold. So 60% or more of those that you serve at the portfolio level need to be at 200% or below of the federal poverty guidelines. So we'll be looking at this ratio. So we'll get this information within sort of how your demographics compare to your outcomes and indicators. But as an organization, we're really mandated to focus on those living at 200% of poverty or below. We've given a little bit of wiggle room because we know some organizations and some programs have intentional sort of mixed income strategies, but this is really the threshold that you're going to need to hit for eligibility. Moving on, United Way funds will need to be no more than 20% of your organizational budget, and that will get calculated. We'll sort of know the org budget bottom line, but that'll be calculated at grant award time, but just know that. Organizations need to be in operation for at least 3 years. That's, I think previously we had maybe a program had to be operating for 2 years. We've kind of broadened this out, so it's really the org that needs to be operating. You'll be asked for financial numbers over a 3-year period, which is where we'll be able to sort of verify this. We're asking all applicants to submit an equity statement. And so this is new. We're asking all organizations to include an equity statement that is really principles that are guiding your work around equity. So this can be an internal document. It doesn't need to be board approved. United Way uses PolicyLink's Equity Manifesto, and that's listed in the RFP if you want to take a look at that. So that'll be one of the uploads that are required. And then finally, you need to have an annual operating budget of at least $250,000. The sort of detail there is by 2019. So if you're slightly under that, but can kind of prove that $250,000 by 2019, you'd still be eligible. That number is lower than in previous RFPs, and so wanted to highlight that change. So other key pieces to keep a close eye on here, as I spoke, the last slide was on organizational eligibility. Within that, at the portfolio level, you'll also see in some areas that there's portfolio level eligibility. So within those areas, there may be a few things that are really deal breakers that have to sort of happen in order for the application to be eligible within that portfolio. So look closely at that. And then there's a series of preferences, or what are called preferred approach or preferred criteria within this RFP. So these are really practices we support and feel make for high quality programs and have a good chance of getting outcomes, but they aren't required. So those that are meeting preferred criteria, will get more points within this area, but it won't render an organization out of the running if they can show that they can really achieve the outcomes and are really strong in achieving those outcomes, but have a different way of doing it. So we wanted to leave some flexibility there for organizations to say, like, this is how we get there, and we can prove that it's getting results. So that does it for me. I'm now going to pass the torch onto my colleagues, and they're going to speak more in depth around the different impact areas and portfolio areas under this RFP.